Hola amigos, bien o no, y saludos desde Inglaterra. Um, Hoy el tema es como de una pregunta. ¿Por qué leer? ¿Por qué leer en este mundo moderno cuando, como así, podemos mirar y escuchar muchas cosas? ¿Por qué leer? ¿Y por qué, o sí, puede ayudarnos o no? So, ese es el tema de hoy. So, hello again from England. The theme of the day is really a question. And that question being, well, really, why read at all? Why are we reading? Why read when we can do this, when we can watch videos and listen to things instead? But why read at all? Um, and it's an interesting question, yeah? I thought about this for different reasons, really. I mean, as you know, and I've been sharing with you over the last couple of weeks, one of the things I'm doing now, I'm back in England for the moment, is I'm looking through some of the books I have here. And this particular one I'm looking at today, I first read way back in 1990, which is interesting because at that point, this is before we had all of this technology. And it makes you think a little bit in terms of where you get used to looking for information in different ways. So for me, as someone who grew up in the 70s and 80s, books were the only way to do it. So that's my default place to look for stuff, is to look for a book about the subject and then read it. But of course now we have this, and it's very good too. I have to say, really, without YouTube, I don't think I would have found such an easy way for me to practice my Spanish, for instance. It's great. I've got loads of resources, all kinds of topics, things I can listen to, really help me with my listening and come across all kinds of interesting things. But it is still a little bit different to reading. Why is that? Why is it different to reading? Because the information is the same, yeah? Why is it different, for instance, you listening to me talk about a subject than if I give you a book on the same subject and you read it? Why is it different? That's the interesting point, yeah? Partly, I guess, because if we're watching it on video or TV or something like that, the conversation is one that we can listen to, but perhaps more difficult to join in because we just have to listen to the conversation. Whereas when we're reading a book, in some level it's a bit more of a personal conversation with the author because there are the words. Now obviously we have to read it, but the dialogue we get is very different. It's at our speed of reading, and it's an internal dialogue, something that we can hear our internal voice reading the words. But I think the really interesting thing with this is also the imagery this draws in, because when we're reading it, obviously we see in our mind what the author's talking to us about. This perhaps is why if we read a book first and then we go later on at some other point and we see the film of the same book, often we're a bit disappointed because that's not how I remember the book. Well, no, because your mental picture of what happened in the book is probably very different from the director, and he's got a different idea, and you would never have cast that actor to play that part, right? That's a basic example. But it's not to say that one's better than the other, it's just that it's different. And perhaps we can use that to our advantage. So with this kind of media, like video, let's say, because it comes with sound, it's very helpful. And in many ways, this is why I make these videos, yeah? It's so I can share with you things in English that you, as generally students of English, can then listen to and hopefully get better attuned to our way of speaking, our accent, and that should help you as students of the language to improve your sound and pronunciation. Yeah? So for that kind of thing, it's very useful. But also, if you are still studying and you're using a book just to read, as we said in another video, there are different ways to do it. You can either use it to read aloud, so you have a script to follow, and all you have to do is say the words, and then you can listen to how you sound, and that gives you a way of improving your practice without having to think of lots of words yourself. So that takes that stress out of it. All you have to do is read it. But as well as that, by reading books themselves, it's a much more reflective experience. By reflective, I mean it makes you think about things, because the speed at which you read, generally, is different to the way you can listen to things. And often, well, I find personally, when I'm reading books, often as I'm thinking while I'm reading, you know, I'm seeing what the author's talking about, I'm kind of putting together the ideas that I'm reading, trying to make sense of them, and maybe something else will come to my mind. I'm thinking about something else. So basically I'm pausing the reading really while I think about it. I think, see how it links together, and then I'm carrying on. So it would be rather like pausing the video, thinking a bit about what was said, and then going back to it. Now obviously some things we can do like that, but certainly watching television, that's not so easy, right? You have to watch the whole thing and then think about it. So it's just an interesting thing to note. Yeah, I was conscious of this today because I've got all these books I'm looking through, and I'm thinking, okay, well, which ones of these do I want to keep? Why do I keep them? Am I going to reread this book again, ever? In some cases, no. I've read it and I look at it and I think, well, no, I can't say I enjoyed that one that much the last time. Or perhaps I've read it and I don't think I need to keep it to reread it, because now I've found out something different that either, you know, goes past what this book taught me, or it's just something I'm not really interested in refreshing my memory of particularly. But it's a point to consider, because reading is a different type of skill. It's a very different thing to do, and it has its good points and bad points. Yeah, I mean, on one hand, it's quite a concentrated thing to do. So you have to get good at being able to concentrate. Perhaps where somewhere it's noisy, you know, you've got to concentrate on what you're reading. But on the other hand, once you get used to that, of course, it is a very immersive experience. So, you know, you can really ignore the things going on around you, because you can be transported literally by what you're reading about. But I suppose the same is true when you're watching something that's very interesting, yeah? But for me, I think the real difference with this, and the reason I still go back to use books when I'm trying to understand something that is complicated, I think the thing I like about using books is I can pick different ones on a similar topic. I find that an easier way of assimilating all the information together. Now you say, yeah, well, you could do that with different videos, and that's true, and I use them as well. But I think at some point, the inner conversation you have when you're reading, or when you're taking notes perhaps, helps you to kind of put these ideas together, and then from that, develop something else. So for that part of the process, reading is quite helpful, I think, because it's a different pace to just listening. And if I'm just listening to things and I want to take that a step further, for me to use like videos to help me understand a topic perhaps, I would really need to take some kind of notes, which in a way then I can read later on. So this is not to say that there's like a right or wrong answer to this idea, but it's one I think we could discuss, because, or think about, draw your own conclusion to it. What do you think about it? Because since we're studying languages generally, a big part of any language really, is still the literature, the books that are written in that language. But how many of us use them? Or how do we use them? Do we use them enough? Do we use them too much? Should we use more videos? Is this a better way of communicating? That's an open question, yeah? Which do you find easier to use? And if you're a dinosaur like me and you grew up reading books to start with, perhaps this new technology is more of a challenge. But that's just an open question I leave you with for today. Because in some ways, all the books that I've read have informed all the content in the videos that I make on the channel, because the books I've read have helped me develop my vocabulary in English. It's helped me with my fluency in that language, and often because of the ideas that are contained in the books, that's kind of what's helped make me me. It's helped frame my point of view. Now that could still be said of all the films and videos and TV stuff I've watched as well, but you get the idea. Different ways of connecting with the language, different ways we can use it, and what kind of results we get. So, okay, we'll leave it there because it's a very open point, yeah? Why do you read? Do you read? Should you read more? Do you think it's a useful tool for your study? Or do you think that the videos, particularly when we're studying languages, do you find these the most useful? And why? It's just a thought to think about it. Going back to the thing we spoke about the other day, if you can develop your inner conversation, so when you're thinking about these things, can you think about that in the new language? That's a real challenge. So, for example, okay, I'm thinking about this as I'm talking to you now in English, but if I was making the video in Spanish, could I still do it? Could I think in my mind about all these thoughts in Spanish and then communicate it in a Spanish version of the video? Well, sí, creo, pero puede ser un poco difícil por algún vocabulario. Claro. So, yeah, I probably could, but the vocabulary might be more a stretch. Anyway, that's the idea for the day. Have a think about it. Sometimes these questions are, what they are. They're very open questions, so there's no real right, wrong answer. It's just a way of getting you to think about it, because then you can express your thoughts, and that is what's going to test and help you improve your expression using the vocabulary you have. Anyway, we'll leave that there for the day. I hope wherever you are, the weather's as nice as it is here. So for now, we'll say cheerio.